Welcome to the Inferno Cast. Today's guest is a lifelong martial artist. He is also a TV and film actor. You would have seen him in shows such as Supernatural, Lost, Dexter, and a couple of films like National Treasure and The Big Lobowski. Please welcome Mark Pellegrino. How are you doing today, sir?
What's up, man? I'm doing like everyone else during the Corona apocalypse. Just hunkering
Yes,
down.
that's it, man. We're just trying to make it through.
Yep.
You know, we were connected through a mutual friend, Marcus Vinicius. He said he trained BJJ with you, and he spoke really highly of you. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about your martial arts background and kind of how you got started. So my first question would be, how did you kind of discover martial arts and get interested when you were younger?
I think my mom wanted to get rid of me, so she pawned me off to the YMCA first, and I got into a style called Shotokan karate, which is a Japanese style, very traditional hard style karate. But I was sort of bored with that style pretty quickly, and so I started jumping around to various schools and auditing them, I guess, watching their styles, and I wound up in Tarzana. At a Taekwondo school, and this Grandmaster Chong Li was the master of the dojang there. And I watched these young guys doing the most amazing kicks I'd ever seen in my life. And I watched this savvy, handsome young Korean guy walking down the line of students going, "Ana, do, set, that," and hitting them with the bamboo sword when their form wasn't perfect. I was like, man, this school is awesome. I got to go here. So I started studying with the guy who wrote like Dynamic Kicks and had the most perfect form I'd ever seen kicking. And there was this guy there too, who was a red belt at the time that I was like 12, and this guy was perfect. And so I stayed there for a couple of years. And then I don't remember why I had to drop out of that school, but I had to drop. It was sort of far for me, and my mom taking me back and forth, it became sort of an issue. And then I had a friend in high school who was a Shodan black belt in Kodokan Jiu-Jitsu, and we became very good. He used to see me do the splits and do all this crazy stuff during PE class, and so he knew I was a martial artist, and we became friends. And he's like, let's practice a little bit. So we'd go to my house after school, and for 5 hours at a pop, we just practice jiu-jitsu. We'd do Uwari and Nagi techniques, and he had a mat in his car. And then after like about a year of that, he brought me to his school, which was just in a Granada Hills Park Recreation Center. They called it the Granada Hills Jiu-Jitsu Kai. And I went in there as an 8th Q white belt, and he would demonstrate on me and throw me like I was a brown belt. Nobody understood how an 8th Q white belt was getting his ass kicked like that. And so I studied that for, I guess, until I was 19 or 20. So from about 17 to 19 or 20. And just before I was testing for my brown belt, he threw me, and he didn't care how I landed, unfortunately. And I landed right on my neck and shoulder, and just got completely messed up. That was the beginning of my injuries in martial arts. And that's been a long time. So that was the start of it all.
When you got into it originally, were you like following books and movies, that were like, was the mainstream media of martial arts influencing you, or was it all just about the training?
I mean, it was about the training mostly. And I was, of course, a fiend for Black Belt magazine and Kung Fu magazine. And then you find out years later that a lot of the guys who are the cover stories of Black Belt magazine were frauds. It's like, the pressure point stuff that they were using. What's that guy's name? I forget that guy's name. He's just been sort of outed as a massive fraud, but he was on like every cover. And my sensei became very obsessed with that pressure point stuff. And so he subjected me to that, and I'd be like, he'd do them on me. I'd be like, yeah, not so much feeling that. It's not really is this real? And he was totally into it. So I really did like it, and I hoped to do it my whole life,
Yeah.
But the Taekwondo is a young man's sport for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it definitely is the flexibility and the agility that comes with it. Like, I mean, that's just there's definitely a timestamp expiration date on that. You know, for some of us that it's hard to go that long. So,
At least for me.
how did you get introduced to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Like, you know, because you were doing the Japanese stand-up Jiu-Jitsu, like, so then you hear, oh, they're doing Jiu-Jitsu, I'm doing Jiu-Jitsu, right? Like, so how did you run into that?
So, I got hurt doing the traditional style. It's funny. I don't actually get hurt doing the stuff. I get hurt doing other things, but it's from, habitual, being slammed on the ground and stuff. So I actually got hurt at work and injured my back. And I was thinking, I've got to do some kind of style that, that is I'm not going to get thrown around all the time and get battered. Oh, maybe, this kind of jiu-jitsu where you're rolling, where you're on the ground, you can still do stuff on your knees. It might be a lot more body friendly. And so I don't even remember how I got turned on to the Gracies, but, I found this studio. I'm like, okay, let me drive out to Torrance. And I met Royce and Horian. And the school was very young at the time. I think it was 91. I want to say somewhere in the very early 90s. Pre UFC. And these two young guys were just really excited and cool. And they were talking about, hey, we know you're a martial artist and we know you kick and you punch, but, that's not always going to save you. You can punch somebody and they're going to go like, okay, what next? And then you're in trouble. So you got to know how to, grapple on the ground if it should come to that. I'm like, yeah, it's great. Okay, I love that. And so I was part of that early school in Torrance where, there were 5 guys in class and they were all cops, and I was learning that you'd learn like about 5 techniques and then you just roll. That's what you did. Yeah. And it was great. And then I was also studying sort of privately with Royce. And Royce would bring a blue belt or a purple belt in there, and I was just a simple 8th key white belt, and he'd have me spar with them, and so that's what I did for a few months, and it was amazing. And then I was sparring on my knees with this blue belt, and he did something to my back, and I had to crawl out of that studio, and I was just a mess for like. For months, and it took me a while to even get back to martial arts. And then I restarted with Taekwondo, and that's when I got on my black belt program for Taekwondo, and got hurt. I was like, I need this BJJ thing, so I'd invite my wrestling friend over after I'd do Taekwondo, and we'd wrestle. And I got messed up doing that.
That's like the worst thing you can do for recovery is be like, hey, I'm going to call my wrestler friend.
I know, but you know what? BJJ is like, it's like a beautiful but very bad woman. She's so seductive. You have to have her. And there are amazing pleasures that you get when you experience her fully. But she can kill you. So, so that was sort of my experience early on with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then, look, I know Scotty, Scotty Khan. I think you interviewed him. He's a black belt now. Bastard. And he'd been taking Jiu-Jitsu for years and years and years and years. And I've known him since he was 12, I don't know, since he was a kid. And I was like, yeah, man, I can't, I got up to teaching Taekwondo, and then I had to limit my techniques because my back was sort of not good. And, oh no, I forgot to talk about Muay Thai. I did Muay Thai. I trained with some of the best people in Muay Thai at the Jet Center.
Yeah,
okay.
I know you do Muay Thai, so we're coming to that, but you go ahead and finish your story.
Yeah, so Scotty's like, what, you're not gonna hurt your back doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Come on, you're not gonna hurt your back. Just come on. I know this great teacher in Beverly Hills. His name's Marcus Vinicius. I'm like, okay, I know the Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu Club. I've heard of it before. I might have even gone to some version of it when like Oleg Taktarov was like there. There were a bunch of dudes over there. I was Oleg's acting teacher. It's such a small world. Yeah. But I might have gone there back then, and it was like really rough. Lots of cool, rough dudes there. But I was like, it just seemed like a big travel hassle. And I was like, I don't know what I could do this. And anyway, I went to a class with Marcus, and I'm like, this guy's the greatest teacher I have ever had. And I've had tons of teachers, but he knew how to package the technique and explain it while you're doing it, so that you grasped it in your mind and in your body. And he just had a great way of making it really personal, you know. And he had he's like a surfer, so he had this easygoing way about him. Class was just like talking, oh, let's roll, and then we roll, just simple and easy. And I really got so much out of it for like 4 or 5 months. I just loved it. And but you know, as a white belt, you're using too much of everything. And I was sparring other white belts who were using too much of everything. And eventually my back just said, nope, I can't do that too much of everything stuff. So it just went. And I still kept going with Marcus, studying privately with him. But, you know, I couldn't even bridge. I couldn't bridge. And if I was in a position in your guard, just posturing, just that act of posturing up, just killed me. Yeah. And that's when I sparred Scotty. He was a brown belt, and he's like, come on, let's spar. I'm like, oh God, I had no, you know, if you don't have technique, you need strength. But if you don't have strength and your technique is limited, you're fucked. And he just sort of walked all over me, and I'm like, dude, you're a brown belt. I'm a 2-stripe white belt, and I can't bridge.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not here to be your snack food, you know. I mean, come on, man.
He made me his snack food.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one thing that is just that's one of the toughest things that you hear about within the BJJ realm, is whenever people get a spinal injury or a neck injury that stops them from being able to train, you know, all together, at least very little. Because even if you can train a little bit, it's difficult because you can't get the rolls, you just can't get the muscle memory. So it's a slow path, and it's really, really difficult. So when you found Muay Thai, what was that like comparative to your striking background? Like, was that the epiphany of like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy, or was it just kind of familiar? What was that like?
Well, what was funny about that was Muay Thai came in between martial arts. So it came right before I restarted Taekwondo and was determined to get my black belt in Taekwondo. So I was at the Jet Center, which at the time was in Van Nuys on Friar Street. And I loved that place, man. I loved Benny. I thought Benny was great. He had his own style of martial art called Aikido-kan. And I watched those guys test. I mean, I thought, yeah, these guys can fight for sure. And I studied with this Israeli dude named Shuki Ron, who ended up training some really cool people like Pete Sugarfoot Cunningham and a bunch of guys, old school kickboxers, this guy who became world champion from Australia, Stan the Man, something, I can't remember his name now. But he could kick, like, his kicks were unbelievable. He was a great fighter. He studied in the Netherlands, which to me is like second only to, going to Thailand, or maybe even comparable in many ways. And he gave me his style. And for 2 years I did that, and just mostly worked out. I didn't spar a lot. That came later when I started boxing later in life. That's a whole nother story. But I learned a lot of technique, and I worked with him as if I was training for fights. And it was very, very valuable, so that by the time I transitioned to Taekwondo, they would have the sparring at the very end, and people would be in their Taekwondo stance, and I'd be like this, and nobody could touch me. Bang! I just kicked their legs. Bang! Hit them, and they couldn't do anything. I was like, wow, what am I doing studying Taekwondo? I mean, Thai boxing is just, you can't hit me. I can hit you at will. And but I did but every morning I would wake up. I used to show off to people and kick telephone poles. Right outside acting class, I'd be like, boom, and I just relax my leg and hit it, but hard enough that people would go, what the fuck? And that kind of stuff,
you're crazy, man.
You're crazy. But that kind of stuff is like, it wears on you. And so I would wake up in the morning, and it would be like an hour before I could, get my legs warmed up to walk. it just killed me. So that's why I started back to Taekwondo, because I thought, oh, at least I have katas. At least if I'm too old to do all this crazy stuff, I have katas. But then when I was studying at Junchong at the time, I was studying at the North Hollywood Dojang, and my teacher, oddly enough, was Master Chong Lee's student, and his name was Mr. Gibson, and then I started studying simultaneously, privately, with one of the baddest fucking Taekwondo guys I've ever known. Do you know JJ Perry at all?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of
yeah, I know that is. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So,
okay, so
I remember him when I was a kid doing Taekwondo, and I bought a magazine, and he was one of the guys that was in the magazine like a long time ago. They did like some article or something like that. Yeah, no, I haven't heard that name probably, man, geez, I can't even remember. Probably 15, 20 years.
I think he's a stuntman now, but he opened a dojang in Inglewood, right in the middle of the hood. And so I would train in North Hollywood 2, 3, 4 times a week. And then I would go to Inglewood 3 or 4 times a week and train with him. And when I was a green belt, he would put me in the black belt sparring classes. And a lot of those guys were like Junchong people. And he on the side, he was like, hey, the Brazilian Taekwondo team, Olympic team is coming in. Get in here and spar with them. And he'd make me spar with these dudes. So I remember when I was a 2-stripe red belt, right under black belt, I was testing. I think I was testing for my 2nd stripe red, and they put me against the black belt candidate to spar. And by that time, it was like I was in JJ's class, so it was like anyone in a conventional class just looked like they were standing still. I mean, and the very first, I was up against this Korean kid, and I'd been watching him. I was like, I know they're going to put me up against this guy because he was really good. He was going for his black belt. But I could see that he liked the lead leg roundhouse kick. Okay, so I'm like, I'm spinning on this guy. So they put us together. It's literally, I'm sitting there watching him. He comes in with a lead leg roundhouse kick. I spinning back kick, bang, under the chin. The whole thing was over in like a second. Master Ree and Master Chong, Jin Chong were like, whoa! And I felt like I ruined the guy's black belt test. But I mean, I've been studying with JJ, so
it'll definitely be a memorable one. Yeah, man, I actually watched a clip. Raymond Daniels actually posted a clip yesterday where he did that exact same thing. A guy came in with a lead round, and he did a spin side right under the chin and put him down. I mean, like, that's just, if it lands, man, like, things go bad.
It took a long time for that kick to make its way into the UFC. I mean, I always thought that kick was outstanding. It was like my favorite thing to do. And I'm like, why did it take so long to find its way into the UFC?
I think it's kind of like one of those deals of, because like when you look at mixed martial arts, and with my background doing a lot of MMA and things of that nature, there's so many fundamentals that you have to like check boxes on to just like survive. Like you gotta have some wrestling, you gotta have the back boxing, you gotta be able to defend submissions. I think it took so long just because people were starving for education for jiu-jitsu and high-level striking, and more than that, maybe the integration of those styles, that it just took so long for people to find like all this education where it's like, hey, here's some unorthodox approaches. Because if you look at the high levels UFC now, the unorthodox, what we would call traditional techniques, they're doing very well. Like Anderson Silva and Damian Maia. I mean, not Damian Maia. Oh,
I know you're talking about, but I'm having a brain fart. I know who you're talking about.
Lyoto Machida. Like they really demonstrated, like, man, these unorthodox traditional strikes can work. You still got to have the full package. You got to be the real deal. But yeah, just seeing those strikes now, it just makes it so much more fun. Because you don't know what's going to happen. So I definitely think it was the maturity of the sport, the learning curve, because it's just like, man, I got to survive full mount first. Like, I got to get out of there.
Oh my God.
Cool stuff.
Oh my God.
Do you follow MMA still? Are you,
I sort of do, but on the fringes. I haven't followed it for a little while, but I'd like to. If I could, I'd watch, all the fights. It's just,
well, there's so much, there's so many athletes now, and there's so many, there was just so many shows, that it kind of, even for me being in the industry, like it was kind of hard to keep up with everybody that's
Yeah.
fighting and card changes and things of that nature. But I'm thankful it went mainstream because I feel like it's really brought martial arts into the limelight, more prominent, and people are getting more educated about it. They're not showing up to gyms like, I just want to fight. Like, they know what they're looking for. I want to do jiu-jitsu or kickboxing, or I want to do taekwondo or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a fun progression. So with all of the training of the physical styles, like, what were some of the lessons and like intrinsic stuff that's like kind of bled over into the rest of your life?
Well, I mean, my original contact with Kodokan Jiu-Jitsu, my teacher was a Zen fanatic. So, and acting, my actual profession is sort of a Zen problem. So a lot of that capacity to immerse yourself in the moment, to be sensitive, to change, and to flow like water, are all characteristics that I could take into acting, and are actually very good at helping me be flexible, release ideas about the way things should be, and just go with what's going on. I would love that to have translated even more into BJJ, because you just need that body sensitivity. Your mind has to be really attuned to what the other guy's doing, and you have to be conceptually aware. So you have to be be aware of what they're doing and thinking, here, I'm 4 moves ahead. I'm trying to be 4 moves ahead, and that kind of strategic thinking can also help you as an actor, because you're seeing the whole picture and being in the moment. But I think that's more high level stuff. I mean,
So do you feel like it helped, like did it help maybe your abstract perspective of what was going on? Would you say?
It helps my abstract perspective, and it helps my attunement to the other person. Because I think as an actor, you have to let go of your homework, and you have to be in the moment with the other person so that you have a real experience. And in jiu-jitsu, you have to feel what the other person's doing so that you can flow with it and sort of use their energy against them. So I found that it made me much more sensitive. Sort of like if you're doing Tai Chi, they have this thing called push hands that makes you sort of sensitive to the other person's flow.
So instead of just projecting energy all the time, you're also receiving the feedback.
Yeah, and like one of the things I loved watching black belts spar with you, even sparring with black belts, because it's like they're just like this. They're just going with you. They're not even it's like the good actor doesn't appear to be doing anything. Well, the really great jiu-jitsu practitioners also just sort of doesn't look like they're doing anything, but they are. All of a sudden they have a leg. All of a sudden they have your ankle. All of a sudden they have you you're choked. You're in a compromising position, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you didn't even see it coming because it was just so gentle. Unlike white belts, we're projecting all of our physical strength onto the thing. We're trying to make it do what we want. And there's a marriage. Yeah, when you're fighting, you want to win. You need to assert your will over the other person. But jiu-jitsu does it in a reverse psychology way. It makes you feel like the other person's winning when suddenly you are able to turn their energy on them. At least that's my sense of it. And that's very subtle. That's very subtle and very transferable to other arts, I think.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine about actors, and the question was, how do you identify a world-class actor? As far as like when you're on the outside looking. And my question would be, what attributes would define a world-class actor that parallel with what you're saying with this martial arts perspective of being sensitive and in the moment? Like, can you articulate what that would look like?
Yeah, I've worked with a bunch of world-class actors. I've been fortunate in that respect. Academy Award-winning actors who deserved it. And they are a combination of intuitiveness and a conceptual, the ability to conceptualize that most people don't have in tandem. Most people could be intuitive, or they're all in their head. They're not both simultaneously. And the best actors I've seen are both. They're deeply intuitive, they know the truth and they go for it. And they also have a grasp of story. I mean, I think when you're sparring properly, which I don't know if I ever did in jiu-jitsu, I never really was able to get to that 5 moves ahead phenomenon. You have a whole narrative, you have the whole story in front of you, and you're open to shifts and subtle changes as the story is taking place live in front of you, but you know where you're going, and you know where you're going based on what the other person's doing. And that's the way a good actor is, and a good actor is like that. So yeah, I mean, when I watched Jeff Bridges' work, I saw a great jiu-jitsu, there to me. And when I saw Philip Seymour Hoffman work, I saw a master craftsman work. And when I see Marcus Vinicius and some of his black belt students work, I see somebody who's just an incredible craftsman, who has that perfect combination of I'm 5 moves ahead of you, and yet I'm also open to the moment and open to change. I mean, that would be my ideal to get there with jiu-jitsu.
How much do you think that there's an important factor of you have to release expectation, or preference? How important do you feel like that is within the martial arts as being an actor, or even just being successful in life? Like, how much do you think that constricts people?
Oh my God, I think that's a great question and a great observation. I'm a lover of the Stoics, so I really believe that, and of course, read the Book of 5 Rings and over again as a young man. To me, expectation can kill everything, and forcing your will on to nature, it can kill everything. Even when you're doing good work and you're dynamic, the expectation makes you constantly compare and measure where you are with what you want it to be, and it's never what you want it to be. So acting, it should be a constant practice of letting go of that expectation, just like martial arts. I mean, really, in martial arts, the best I've done was not anticipating. I mean, not anticipating or not, I can't say not anticipating, because you have to know where the other person's coming from and sort of anticipate what they're going to do based on their behavior. But you can't have an expectation of a result. You just have to be immersed.
Could it maybe be respond instead of react?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's very good. I think that's very good. I think I would say that to an actor. I mean, a lot of acting teachers say acting is reacting, but you can say acting is responding. That's a deeper form of receptivity than just reacting.
And it seems like, I mean, because look at life in general. When people are out and they have expectations, they have preference, which you illustrated, it leads to comparison. It leads to measurement of metrics that are honestly not even real. Like, oh, this was on Instagram, this was on Facebook, I saw this on television. People start measuring, which then they start creating a measurement of their self-worth based on fallacies. So if you were going to advise people on how do you break through that comparison and the fallacies of measurement, what would you advise them to do? Like, where would you lead them?
Well, I mean, I think that's sort of a human habit, I mean, we're conceptual beings, and you develop concepts by comparing and contrasting things. So it's sort of a natural, it's sort of built into our machines, so to speak, our machinery, our cognitive machinery. So I would first tell them, if they want happiness, they should sort of seek guidance, I think, from the Stoics and from the masters, who can help them to focus their thoughts on the appropriate things. First of all, it's strange, because I'm sort of torn on this issue, because while on the one hand I think we live in an age of envy, and envy is destroying the culture, And envy comes from comparing yourself to other people, wanting what they have, wanting to destroy them because they have more than you or something different than you or something you want. On the other hand, I like there's a part of me that likes the competitiveness, that comparison can often make you better than you are, right? If I look at myself in comparison to Marcus Vinicius, I'm like, I want to be that. I want to be that good. And that can spur my healthy ambition to actually become better than I am. But by the same token, there's an unhealthy aspect to ambition, and you just need to figure out where to put your focus then, and that's within your control. I will focus on this moment. I will focus on the completion of this task. You know, you sort of make it more of a micro focus as opposed to a macro focus when you feel that that macro focus is overwhelming you. I don't know if that made any sense. This is a massively complex issue to me.
No, that makes perfect sense, because you hit it on the head. Because one, you identified focus as like, when you gain control of your focus, you're going to gain control of your life. And then the second part of that, when you mentioned the competitive nature of healthy versus unhealthy, there's different types of competition, and in martial arts especially, everybody can identify with this. There's the guy that wants to beat you because he wants to improve and be better, and there's the guy that wants to beat you to put you down so that he is elevated above you. Like, there's two very different energies that anybody that's done martial arts, and even outside of that, I'm sure that you have been around people in your industry that were growing and trying to achieve and pushing the envelope to raise all ships around them versus people that were trying to raise themselves. You know, they were looking more of the microscope instead of the macro. So, I mean, I think that you really identified it very clearly of, there are healthy and unhealthy competitive habits that you know, exist within us. And the healthy ones, everybody grows, even though I may be second, just like with Professor Vinicius. It's like, I go train with him, I know he's going to win. Like, I know. But me chasing, trying to beat him, that second place, like, I only got tapped 4 times that round, is perfectly acceptable, you know, and is almost like pride of growth instead of pride of achievement. And I really feel like that's what you identified with that healthy, unhealthy, which would bring me to my next question of, do you think that people's fear of vulnerability and judgment maybe drives their healthy versus unhealthy competitive nature?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Look, in the acting technique that I teach and had studied for many years, you know, you deal with the fundamental problem of acting, which is self-consciousness, by training your attention on something that, you know, is important to you. And likewise, I think and you have to be open and vulnerable. And you're right. I think people are afraid of the judgment, and they see that, and they just need to take the attention off of that and put it on, I'm going to learn how to do this omoplata. I'm going to learn how to do this particular choke. I'm going to learn how to get out of from under a full mount. And I'm just going to learn that. And I don't have to be perfect at it. I'm just going to, you know, I know that over time, I'm going to get better if I just keep at it. So for sure, people are too afraid of being vulnerable, too afraid of being exposed and being seen as being weak. And in a social media culture where, you know, your feelings are sort of public now, they're the public domain, especially for somebody like me who's a celebrity, then everybody sees what you think and has something to say about it. It's really hard to maintain an openness and vulnerability, but hey, that's how you live and grow, you know?
You know, I was talking to a friend, and the discussion was about vulnerability. And I just know with like my personal life, when I was younger, I valued my ability to block vulnerability. You know, it's just like, the tougher I am and nobody gets in, like and I almost feel like it was this sensationalized media hero just growing up watching movies and the tough guys. And like, I valued that. And then there was a point in my life that I found that for me, I was like, vulnerability seems to be giving me power, you know, like, because I became open to not only people that were close to me, but then it started becoming more people that are close to me. Then it was being open to like opportunity. And it was almost like getting all of your energy out, as you mentioned, focused on one thing when you don't have the fear of vulnerability, you're able to put like 100% into one direction. Because you always people hear, you know, they always tell you like failure's not an option. I think that most people have not actually achieved that moment where failure is not an option because they won't allow themselves to commit to that focal point. Would you look at that management of vulnerability and focus? Would you look at that relationship as correlated to people that are finding extreme amounts of fulfillment in life?
Oh, for sure. You know, to me though, when you say failure is not an option, it's like that's the kind of pressure that one puts on oneself that actually robs you of your joy, robs you of your vulnerability, robs you of you know, experiencing the content of your life. You have to be willing to fail multiple. You have to be willing to fail multiple times. Like for me, it wasn't that Muhammad Ali wasn't great because he won the heavyweight championship 3 times. He was great because he got up off the canvas and went against the odds. He lost and won again, right? To me, what makes you a champion is your capacity to come back from failure, not that your ability to stave it off. If you're a human being, you're going to fail. That's just the way it is. And you're not going to get any better unless you do, right? You being tapped by Marcus 4 times, and damn it, only 4 times is you failed 4 times, but you became a better man as a result of it. You learned something. You're better and stronger coming out of that school now than you were when you walked in. And I mean, you need failure. You need it's the compost and the fertilizer for your life that makes all those vibrant flowers and plants grow. Man, you need it. Don't embrace it. I say embrace it.
Do you think that people's focus on not failing and the reward, you know, the belt, you know, the victory, the recognition, the blockbuster, do you think that their hyper focus on that result deters from their journey of what really matters?
I think so. I mean, I think on the one, for a healthy, ambitious person, you're setting a level for yourself, and to attain it is a milestone. But that healthy ambition, you also realize there's a point at which you're not going to be on that pedestal anymore. But the person who's doing it for fame and recognition doesn't seem to understand that all of those things are ephemeral. They're going to go away. You're not going to be champion anymore. You're not going to be the baddest dude on the block anymore. People are probably going to, you know, see you in a restaurant and not come up to you anymore and say, "Hey, you're awesome." And if you're married to those things, those ephemeral things, you are doomed. You are doomed to unhappiness. Look, I became friends with an old actor who's since passed away. I won't say his name. Who won the Academy Award, was nominated 3 times, won once, was a great old actor who was sort of hung up in that world of, you know, people know me, and it was depressing to watch when I mean, I felt terrible for him if you went up to somebody and said, "Hey, I'm so and so," and they looked at him like, "I have no idea who you are," because he was clinging on to something, you know, that was ephemeral, and I understood why he was depressed all the time. You got to hold on to that thing, you know, that's always going to be there. And what's always going to be there? I reached a goal for myself. I reached a goal to see if I could do it, and I found I could. Like for me, it would be a great goal just to pass my blue belt test. You know, for me, if I could get a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu one day, I'll be the happiest guy on the planet. I mean, not just because like a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is gnarly. I mean, to me, it's like the only martial art I've ever experienced where an intermediate rank person can handle himself in the real world. I mean, no question. But because that would be, that's an almost unimaginable achievement to me, given my physical issues. And just being a purple belt would be like a dream come true. I mean, I'd be, oh my God, I'm a purple belt in Brazilian. I could stop there, but you know. So yeah, I mean, there is something to say. There is something to say for. I don't mean to sound anti-ambition, because I'm pro-ambition. But you know, if you aim lower, you're apt to be more satisfied. And if you make your goals achievements that are inner goals, spiritual goals for your own benefit, then you're not going to get all hung up in the things that'll rob you of your joy.
Well, I mean, it's almost like you're saying, focus on the goal, like try to overachieve, but don't measure your self-worth by if that achievement happens. You know, it's like you can't measure how good of a person you are because you either, you know, you won or lost or something of that nature. It's the pursuit of excellence without possibility of perfection. You know, it's just like every day you chase it as aggressive and as hard as you can, but it is not conditional on your happiness. It's like, you know, like for me, you know, it's like if I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna start being an actor, and I go chase that every day, and I never get one role, I should be able at the end of that to feel fulfilled. Of I tried my best, I did whatever I could, I enjoyed the journey, instead of saying, well, I will be happy when this happens or that happens. Like I feel like that's kind of what you conveyed, of don't limit
Indeed,
yourself.
you make acting about being a good actor, not about how people are going to receive you, because your success in acting is to some degree dependent upon other people. And
Yeah.
like Bruno Kirby, a great actor who's since passed away, Bruno Kirby once said to me, he's like, hey, I know there are actors out there who can act me under the table and they're driving a cab in New York City. It's like, that was an extremely humbling thing to say, humbling in the best sense. Like the man had perspective. And I think that's, you do need that to be happy. You do need that perspective in the end to be happy.
It's ironic you say that because I was talking to Travis Stevens. He's an Olympic judo player, and he said the exact same thing. He's like, Caleb, when I was on that podium, he's like, I knew there are guys that are better than me in the world that'll never even be on the mats in the Olympics. He's like, you are not going to be the best in the world. He's like, but you can be the best you in the world. And that's where happiness lies, because he talked about his first trip to the Olympics, and just like what you're saying, he had that whole like, failure's not an option. I'm in the best shape of my life. Like this, I've given everything. And then he lost. And he's like, I so emotionally connected and believed that. He's like, it's the most devastating thing in my life, because I had convinced myself that I was the best I could have ever been. And if I didn't win then, how could I ever win? How could I ever get better? And he spent the next 4 years changing his perspective and his mindset to where he was just trying to perform at his best, you know, and, you know, it was no longer contingent on winning or not. And of course, then he goes out and performs, you know, imaginably great and just, you know, great story. But I feel like when I talk to people that have success in life, I mean, just like yourself, man, you're a successful person. You've had a great career. You've done a good job of honing your craft and, you know, all these things. And when you look at your success and you look at your martial arts training, like a lot of the principles and the things you bring up, you know, they're paired and they're almost universal truths. And that's kind of what I would ask you is, if you were going to tell somebody, here's my perspective on finding fulfillment, what would it be?
That your fulfillment has to be internal. It can't be measured by any metric outside of yourself. It can't be measured by what your neighbor thinks or what society thinks is good. It has to be your own metric, your own goal. I mean, imagine imagine the misery of Van Gogh, because he went through this feverish year of painting, 300 paintings, beautiful. They're all masterpieces today. But the only person who bought his paintings was his brother. And it was extremely distressing. You can't, you know, you can't, as an artist, as a person who's creating value in the world, you can't measure yourself by whether or not that value is accepted, but by the fact that you're creating it. And the act of creation is what I think should be the metric of your success. I remember one time, just to sort of jump back to what the subject that we're talking about, I used to go to a philosopher, you know, and I'd talk to this philosopher for hours at a time. And I said, man, I'm constantly discontented. You know, I suck. I'm terrible. How am I going to get over this? Like, I feel like I grow as an actor, and then I take steps back. Then I feel like I grow and I take steps back. What can I do? And in his house, he had little statues of Greek gods. He had this beautiful old world house, and there was a statue of Mercury, and Mercury was flying, and he had his hands like this. And he said, see, Mark, this is you, and this is your potential. And every time you do this, your potential does that. And I thought, well, that changed my perspective entirely, and made my metric completely internal instead of external. Because it's like, oh yeah, the higher I reach, the higher my potential is going to go. And if I don't get attuned to that fact real fast and just know that that's just the way it's going to be, I'm going to be really unhappy. So I'm just going to know that the higher I reach, the more my potential goes up, and I'm okay with where I am right now. So, you know,
that really it makes sense, because like I've heard it, you know, mentioned the what's next syndrome. You know, like people are just, what's next, especially as achievers. And you see that in the martial arts industry a lot too, because a lot of people come into martial arts, you know, they're looking to kind of, you know, I want to be able to protect myself. I'm looking for confidence, you know, I want a little bit of recognition, you know, and there's all these things that people are kind of looking for out of it. And they become very focused on my accomplishments equal my value. So it's like, oh, I got to get this belt. I got to get that belt. I got to win this fight. I got to be a competitor. I have to be this person. But people do that in their lives everywhere, you know, where they're seeking the approval of people in the external. And it's like, when you depend on the external for any kind of internal value, I mean, you're a victim of circumstance, and that is a very torturous lifestyle. I mean, it is difficult.
Yeah.
So when you look at people being successful, if you were going to give us 2 or 3 principles that you would like leave with your children, it's like, I have nothing left to give you. All I can give you is, here are the principles for you to lead your life with to become successful. What do you feel like those would be?
I think you have to have independent mindedness. You can't allow the community's judgment of you to determine your own assessment of yourself, because it's possible for 1,000 people to be wrong and only one human being to be right. I would say always use your mind, and never let something pass without it going through the filter of your mind and sifting out the truths from the untruths. So trust yourself, be independent minded. And I would say, and be persistent above all. Because look, you know, when Steve Martin took up the banjo, he understood a principle. He's like, yeah, if I just keep doing this for 15 years, I'm going to be pretty doggone good if I just do it, right? I could just show up half-assed and still get good, get better. And that's true. It's like acting is more than anything, it is persistence. And you have to stand against a community of people that want to pigeonhole you and think you're something that you're not, and stand up for yourself and your vision, and be persistent with that vision. So be independent minded. Don't let other people be the metric of your success, and be persistent. Don't stop. Now, I don't know how to apply that to my jiu-jitsu because I have so many injuries. What do I do? Yeah. Now I'm seeking advice from you. What do I do? Because I have dreamed for the past 4 years of going back to Marcus, because I love Marcus. And I'm so nervous that I think that also contributes to, like, oh, I'm going to get injured because I'm nervous.
Oh, there was a 2-year stint in my career back in like the mid 2000s that my paranoia of injury got so high that, I mean, I was injured all the time because I had a bad injury.
Right.
You know, one of my knees, like, it just, man, it was rough. And it created this paranoia. And for almost 2 years, I really battled some serious injuries when I was still trying to compete and do these things. And one day I realized I felt the hesitation. I was like, this is affecting me when I'm training, which is making it worse, because my first thought would be, what if this goes sideways? What if I get injured? Instead of taking that moment of moving out of the way, you know, executing the technique, you know. So I do believe that there's a real correlation there of, you know, your fears and your focus, because that's what you talked about, is when you control your focus, you control your life. And it's controlling your focus to where it moves away from paranoia and into execution. But as far as getting back into martial arts, like a physical therapist, a massage therapist, a chiropractor, an ortho that makes sure your stuff's, like, you know, not too bad, and a coach like Marcus, And it's possible, you know, because but it's consistent small goals that it's the inch at a time syndrome where it will require more patience on your part because after about 2 weeks, it's like, yeah, man, let's go ahead and roll a little bit, you know, or it's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the physical rehab is going to be probably the biggest thing that you'll have to do every single day, probably multiple times
Yeah.
a day. Do you have a story of persistence in your own life that you think that people could identify with?
Well, I think acting in and of itself is a lifestyle that requires so much persistence, right? I mean, because most successes in acting are the proverbial 10-year overnight successes, and in my case, even 20 years. It's like there's no guarantee that anything is going to happen for you, and you have to really shift your priorities around if you want to be happy. So for me, the entire trip of acting is an exercise in persistence, and because you just don't know whether people are going to accept you or not. You have to be content with that. I mean, there was a time when I was working 4 jobs and didn't have a place to stay, couldn't afford rent. You know, I was subletting from people when I could, and nonetheless, I would go to acting class 2 times a week. I'd rehearse 3-4 times a day. I'd read my plays every single day, and I just kept my nose to the grindstone. And I thought, well, you know, at some point, my learning and the opportunity are going to collide in a perfect storm. And if they don't, I have my learning, and then I'm okay with that. And ironically, like with your knee, you let go, you give up, you execute, and things just sort of do fall into place. So yeah, for me, the whole craft of acting is an exercise in persistence.
Was there any time that you ever were like, man, maybe I just need to give this up. Maybe this isn't for me. And how did you get past that?
Yeah, you know, I think when your mentor is telling you that you're not, you know, that it'll happen for you eventually, it's easy to get really discouraged and think that it never will. I remember talking to him and saying, yeah, but what if I die before that time? He's like, well, then you die. Yeah. That was very discouraging. It's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted him to say, you're not going to die before you become successful. You'll become successful. And so there was a time that I had the feeling like, oh, this is never going to happen for me. But it was something that, even though it was a slightly depressing feeling and felt slightly ubiquitous in that, like, it was all over me, I never took it seriously enough. There was just something I didn't believe about it, right? Like, I knew it as a possibility, but I didn't believe it. And so I just went, okay, yeah, maybe. And I just forgot it, went to class and did my thing. And I ended up actually shifting around sort of what I would do. Like, you know, my agent was like, well, you got to be a little bit nicer in meeting, because I would go in there focused and like, yeah, I'm just going for the job. And they're looking at me like, oh, do we want to work with this guy for 6 years? Well, they're looking at it from a different perspective than I am. And so I have to show them, hey, I'm actually fun. And I'm a good guy. I'm a team player, and I'm not going to be a difficult. And so I had to change certain parts of my approach to open other people's minds to the possibility of working with me. But I never let the idea of failure sink into a belief.
Oh man, that's good. I like that. You never let the idea of failure sink into a belief. That right there, that's profound, man. Like, I mean, and those are the things that people, I think, sometimes need to hear is like, people struggle. It gets difficult. You know, just like in martial arts. I mean, the life of a white belt is difficult, you know, and
Oh
it'll
yeah.
get better. And you have to have that persistence. Like you said, you have to have the persistence to move forward. And, you know, and even like your diversity of martial arts background, that goes back to what you were talking about, you know, having an independent mind, you know, like filter information through, find your own truth. You know, like you did Taekwondo, then you did Muay Thai, and you went back to Taekwondo, and you did Jiu-Jitsu, and you've done boxing. Like, you've done all these different things because, you know, you're seeking your truth and finding your path. And I really
Yeah.
feel like that's what resonated with what you were talking about. And you really gave some great clues for success and some very good perspective on, you know, achieving goals and finding fulfillment. And I really appreciate you taking time to talk to me today. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm definitely a fan. You know, I was looking through your work and just like, man, this is cool. Like, you know, you've done so many things I'm definitely a big fan of. Is there anything that you'd like to finish with today?
You know, I really admire you guys who are in the jiu-jitsu game, man, and I want to, I really aspire to have some of that knowledge that you guys have. I admire you guys so much, and for me, it's a spiritual journey. I'm so happy to see that it is for you as well. Um, and and I just want to get back on that train, and hopefully one day I can be in Marcus's dojo, and you and I can roll, and we could laugh about, hey, remember when you said your back was, you know, and that would be fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you for the time. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, man.